ready to start?
Yeah, we're ready to start. Is that Christine Elkins?
Hello there. How are you? Very good, good. Don't know. Don't know. Are you? We got to see Sam's sister. We got out there. We got out there. Really? Brayton's nice. Brayton's nice, and he would have been here. He came with us to CPAC a couple years ago, but he had a friend flying from Idaho, so. Who did?
Just keep sneaking them in.
Wow. How old is she? She's only got about a 99.9999% chance that she's lying. Yeah, I had a vacuum mark on the day now.
Oh.
So, but I know it affects people differently. I get it. You know.
No problem. Uh-oh. What's going on here? Testing. Go, a deer, a female. We're good? All right. Thank you for coming to our side event today. My name is Craig Rucker. I am the president of the Washington, D.C. based Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow. Our side event is called Exposing the Climate Hustle. But before I tell you a little bit about that, I should tell you a little bit about the two organizations that are sponsoring this. The one I represent, CFACT, is a public policy group that's been around since 1985. We work on issues of environment and development. And basically, you could call us kind of a conservative Greenpeace of sort. We work on many of the same issues as the Greenpeace crowd does, but with a free market conservative philosophy. We have a number of programs to get that message out there. One of them is our Climate Depot News and Information Service, and that's headed by the gentleman two over from me, Mark Morano, who you may have seen on Fox News or Hannity or any of these number of other shows. He's kind of our media face, if you would. Much younger and better looking than I am. Rush Limbaugh calls his website, climatedepot.com, his favorite source of climate information other than himself. So. CFACT also has a very aggressive outreach on the college campuses. We have Bob Nee, I guess he's out there, he's our collegians director, and we work on college campuses to bring in great speakers and try to teach people that there is another message out there other than that by AOC and Greta Thunberg on the issues of climate change. We also have a program where we go to UN meetings. I've been to like 22 of them. I don't know why they let us in, but we've been going since the 1990s, advocating against joining the Kyoto Protocol and later the Paris Accord, and have credited by our enemies as being one of the reasons that the U.S. has not joined that accord, to which we take pride. The other organization sponsoring today's side event, Exposing the Climate Hustle, is by James Taylor. He is the president of the Heartland Institute out of Chicago. Excellent organization. They put on a major, if you would, climate realist conference every year, and he does terrific work. You may wonder too why we call this Exposing the Climate Hustle. And I'll give you two quick reasons. Number one is because you are being hustled. All right, the science, really on twofold. One is that the science doesn't stack up. You're being told about severe weather events and the end of the world happening in 12 years. We are united here in saying that's not going to happen. And much of what you've been hearing about sea level rise and melting glaciers, polar bears going extinct, cats and dogs living together, all that's false. All right, so that's one reason. You are being hustled. The other reason is to draw attention to a movie we put out with this gentleman, Kevin Sorbo, called Climate Hustle 2. And Kevin is the star of that movie. He narrates it for us, and literally it peels back and exposes all the various elements of what's behind this. Not just the science, but we look into Hollywood hypocrisy. We got celebrities telling you that you need to take public transportation, eat fake meat, and we capture them doing just the opposite, with limos, private jets, doing all the opposite things.
You mean they're hypocrites?
No.
Like the outdoor telling you that the climate's gonna handle out, his motorcade is all engines are running. His house is lit up like an airport.
Exactly, well, that's why you need to get, this is shameless self-promotion on my part, our latest video, his movie, Climate Hustle 2, which you can go to climatehustle2.com, or we have some DVDs in the back where you can get them for a special one-time offer, usually $15 for $10 today because you're at this side event. So you can find Bob Nee, who's not in here, and you can get that. But we'd encourage you to get that because it really does peel back all the climate hype and indoctrination of school kids, and captures a lot of the left in their own words saying just preposterous things. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to the other sponsor of this organization. Oh, I got to tell you one thing about James Taylor. Not only is he the president of Heartland, which is all nice, and he's widely published, also in the papers. This guy was in the World Series of Poker on numerous times.
Hey, poker face, all right.
Yes, and I'll tell you, he's actually been in the top 20, as many of these great stories in the World Series of Poker on ESPN. So if there's anyone who could spot a hustle, something trying to do something with the card, it is James Taylor. Go ahead, James.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I know we're up on the second floor and way at the end, and still overflow of people coming in. Outstanding. I'll say it's for me rather than Kevin Sorbo.
We love you, Kevin.
But the Heartland
Since
Institute.
his name is James Taylor, he's got a lot of friends instead of just you got
You do have a friend over here.
And somebody yelled out, "We love you, Kevin," and remind me, there's a live album of James Taylor where he's telling stories between songs, and somebody yells out, "I love you, James, I love you too," he says, but it's better we don't get to know each other.
Sorry.
So the Heartland Institute, we are a free market public policy organization. We seek to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to societal problems. Climate change is one of those that we look into. And I am especially happy to be speaking today for a panel regarding Climate Hustle. First of all, because Climate Hustle 1 and Climate Hustle 2 are fantastic documentaries, movies that you need to see. If you believe in the climate crisis and you have not seen Climate Hustle 1 or 2, you are not doing your due diligence. Do your due diligence and then make your decision. Now also, it's fantastic to be here, not just speaking on this panel, but to be at CPAC. All year long, believe me, I go to various conferences, I speak at various conferences. Coming to CPAC and just the vibe and the energy, seeing all the people in this room, seeing the people packed in like sardines downstairs. Congratulations to you. Thank you for energizing the conservative movement. Now, if there's one thing that gets my craw more than a hustle, it's when there is a hustle specifically targeting conservatives because they are conservative. That really bothers me. And that's why I'm happy to be speaking here today. And let me give you an example. We often see, more and more so, usually on CNN or MSNBC, self-professed conservatives who are promoting this idea of a carbon dioxide tax, saying it's a conservative solution to climate change. Now, a little bit more on the climate change topic itself in just a few minutes. But since when is a huge, brand new tax a conservative idea? Year after year, and there are different groups that do this. Groups show up, they have cutouts of Ronald Reagan, and they put conservative in their name, because if they don't have conservative in their name and they don't have a cutout of Ronald Reagan, you wouldn't know they're conservative. If that's the only reason people know you're conservative, you're probably not conservative. Now, the American Conservative Union, you would know it by their policies and what they do and advocate, not so much some of these other groups. So this notion that we can have a revenue-neutral carbon tax or a carbon dividend, something you invest in and then get profit from, let's take a look at that, because that is the biggest hustle around. Okay, why are conventional fuels, conventional energy, why are they so popular today?
Cheap.
Right, they're very affordable. So electricity prices, gasoline prices, different units of measurement. But essentially what we're looking at is this.
Okay.
For conventional energy, let's just put it at 10 units. That's what we pay. For wind and solar power, it's more like 30 units. So how do you get people to purchase wind and solar power through a tax. It's only if you tax conventional energy so much that it becomes more than 30 units. You have to raise the price that high. Now, if conventional energy is priced at 30 units and wind and solar at 35 units, what are people going to buy? Wind and solar. If everyone's buying wind and solar now, how many people are buying conventional energy if it's 30 units versus 35? 0. And this is the heart of why this so-called carbon dividend is a hustle. Because it is revenue neutral for government, not for budgets. They pledge that whatever money government taxes and collects, they'll return to the people in a dividend. But the whole point of their tax is to raise the price of conventional energy higher than wind and solar, so people are not buying conventional energy. You're paying 3 times what you otherwise would for your energy. Government's collecting no revenue because the price of conventional energy is so high no one buys it, therefore government returns nothing to the people. Your dividend is nothing. That's the hustle. That's the hustle. Don't let them talk you into saying, well, you're just getting your money back, it's free money. It's not. There's nothing they collect. What they do is they're going to triple your energy bills and you get nothing in return. Now, some of you may be saying, James, why are you picking on some groups that are relatively friendly? We're conservatives here, and we should all get along together, and I agree that conservatives should get along together. However, these groups, one after one after one, they claim to be conservative. They're like the people, if you listen to your local talk radio, that call in every 4 years and they say, I'm a lifelong conservative, but this Mitt Romney, he's too far right-wing. I'll never vote for him. I'm a lifelong conservative, but John McCain is too much of an extremist. I can't vote for him even though I'm a conservative, even though I'm a Republican. Just because they say it doesn't make it so. And this is something that I am really worked up about, for lack of a better term, because last year, at a session just like this, the CO2 Coalition, which is headed by Dr. Will Happer, many of you know him, he is a patriot, he is a giant of science. He is a professor of physics at Princeton University, and he and his wife live in Princeton. President Trump asked him whether he would come to Washington, D.C. and oversee research and development of programs to protect the United States against an attack on our electricity grid. Dr. Happer, he's an emeritus professor, he's retired now. For him, it was a tremendous sacrifice, but he loves his country, and he decided to come down here. He came down here during the week, and then he'd go home on weekends to see his wife. Now, one of the things that Dr. Happer is also known for is his interest in climate change science. And he will tell you, this is, again, one of the giants in science, that this notion of a climate crisis is a farce. Now, last year, the CO2 Coalition, a group that he founded, they had a workshop like this. And Dr. Happer, because he's a kind soul, he invited someone from the other side, someone that promotes the so-called conservative solution to a carbon tax, Alex Bosmowski, with a group self-identifying as Republican, EN, as in Republicans for the Environment. So Dr. Happer gave a very affable, factual talk about climate change, and then he allowed Bosmowski to speak. Bosmowski launched into him with a bulldog venom that would have made Rachel Maddow blush. He accused Dr. Happer of handing out, this is a quote, handing out asbestos and cigarettes. These are the people who claim they're conservatives. These are the people who try to rope you in. By the way, the founder of that group, Republican Bob Inglis, he was so liberal that even as a sitting Republican congressman and incumbent, he lost his primary 71% to 29%, challenged from the right, because Mitt Romney would have been ashamed of how far to the left Bob Inglis is. Wow. Bob Inglis, by the way, Bob Inglis is one of the people that has been leading the message saying that Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office. This is the company that they keep. These are the groups that claim to be conservatives. When you see somebody professing to have a conservative solution to climate change, understand that it is not a conservative solution. Moreover, these folks are running with, judge them by who they're hanging with. Judge them by who their allies are. Before I turn this over to Mark Morano, I just want to read a statement. Dr. Richard Lindzen, who many of you may know, he's also a giant in science, a longtime atmospheric scientist at MIT. He asked me if I could read a statement from him to you. He sent this to me yesterday. And he's very concerned about people being sucked in to the climate hustle, to the climate delusion. Here is what Dr. Lindzen says. One problem with conveying our message is the difficulty people have in recognizing the absurdity of the alarmist climate message. They can't believe that something so absurd could gain such universal acceptance. Consider the following situation. Your physician declares that your complete physical will consist in simply taking your temperature. This would immediately suggest something wrong with your physician. He further claims that if your temperature is 98.7 degrees rather than 98.6 degrees, you must be put on immediate life support. Now you know he is certifiably insane. The same situation for climate is considered, quote, settled science. If this weren't silly enough, we are bombarded with claims that the impacts of this climate change include such things as obesity and the Syrian civil war. The claims of impacts are then circularly claimed to be overwhelming evidence of dangerous climate change. It doesn't matter that most of these claims are wrong and/or irrelevant. It doesn't matter that none of these claims can be related to CO2 except via model projections. In almost all cases, even the model projections are non-existent. Somehow the sheer volume of misinformation seems to overwhelm us. In case you retain any skepticism about this point, there is John Kerry's claim that climate, unlike physics and chemistry, is simple enough for any child to understand. Presumably, if you can't see the existential danger of CO2, you are a stupid denier. Our task is to show people the overall stupidity of this issue rather than punching away at details. It's the overall message. If public relations advisors can solve this problem, they would be well worth hiring, but I have my doubts. So that's a message to you from Dr. Richard Lindzen. Thank you so much for being here. I turn the microphone over to my awesome colleague, Mark Moreno.
Thank you very much, James. James is the head of the Heartland Institute, and they have been probably the greatest contributions to this debate, having these annual conferences going back to, the first one was, what, 2007 or 8 in New York City? 2008 in New York City. It was a sea change for the whole pushback of the climate change movement. Back when right after Al Gore's first movie came out and he won the Nobel Prize. A lot's happened since then. And what we're going to talk about today is the film, Climate Hustle 2. And I actually have a new book out on green fraud, which is coming out March 23rd by Regnery Publisher, one of the few publishers out there for freedom that you don't have to worry about, censoring books or pulling authors or cancel culture. But Climate Hustle 2 I wanted to talk about first. And Kevin Sorbo does a masterful job going through, lays out the climate debate. In the film, we go through the Hollywood celebrities, the hypocrisy angle, how it's very similar to a climate monarchy. In other words, you have the few ruling elite living a life of opulence and wealth. The Leonardo DiCaprios, the top UN scientists, Al Gore, people like Bill Gates. And we actually did some of the interviews with experts at Louis Versailles Palace in Paris to show you this. It's very similar to the monarchs of old, how they want to impose this upon us. But we go through, and Kevin will walk you through how it's similar to a religion. And one of the most disturbing sections of the film, which is probably the best reason to just buy the film for no other reason, is the kids' indoctrination section. We go through and show you what Greta Thunberg's activism is inspired. Kids now suing the federal government, suing European governments for endangering their future by failing to act on climate. And this is being led by people like NASA's former lead global warming scientist, James Hansen, who was arrested half a dozen times protesting global warming and endorsed a book suggesting we rid the world of industrial civilization. This was the neutral climate scientist who was keeping the record keeping at NASA. This is what we're up against in this debate. But the film also goes into the wacky solutions. We got Nicole Kidman eating live insects as they want to ban meat eating, and that is a big part of the climate agenda, make no mistake about it. It's affecting every aspect of our lives. Biden's done squat so far for the climate agenda. He's done some executive orders. Just wait. In the next 30 to 60 days when the Green New Deal is introduced, all hell is about to break loose. both houses of Congress. This is going to be the blueprint for America. Every aspect of your life, from your home thermostat to your appliances to what you eat. We have Democratic candidates who want to ban the cars, ban private car ownership, and instead give you roving fleets of electric cars. That would be one Andrew Yang, now running for mayor of New York and likely to win. And of course, poor hapless New Yorkers being put upon by the current mayor to go then to someone like Andrew Yang. Elizabeth Warren has suggested no new home building unless it's carbon neutral. Other professors have suggested getting rid of private home ownership because of the climate emergency. So the film goes into this. We have a professor from NYU who wants to shrink human beings because smaller people have smaller carbon footprints. This is true. Matthew Lau, he's very proud of his theory. He also wants to drug us to make us have empathy for the environment. You don't care enough about climate change? Well, we're going to medicate you to make you care. We go into the folly of solar, wind. We go into AOC, the tipping point predictions. So the film is just, it really lays it out there, what's behind this agenda. We actually have rare footage of the U.S. government's federally funded climate change musical. And I'm not making this up. There's people on a stage, federal funded dollars, singing about climate change in UN conferences. It's bizarro world, but this is where we are. So I urge you to see the film Climate Hustle. Show it to your children, particularly if you're about to send them off. I guess no one's going to college anymore, but if you're about to send them off to a higher institute of learning, so-called, before they're indoctrinated, actually show it to your middle school kids before they get too indoctrinated. Indoctrination starts even in kindergarten. So what I want to talk about today, aside from just the movie and the book, is the COVID climate connection. And one other thing though, just to give you an update on the science. This is funny here. Right now, polar bears, I have breaking news. Polar bears are disappearing. This is no joke. I'm a climate skeptic saying this. I know you might be shocked to hear this, that we're admitting polar bears are disappearing. They are disappearing from Al Gore's books and movies. And I'm not making that up. His first film made the polar bear the icon of the global warming movement. His sequel, An Inconvenient Sequel, and his book, An Inconvenient Sequel book, didn't mention the polar bears once. Now, why would that be? Because according to U.S. Geological Survey, polar bears are at or near historic population highs. We have now, just in the last 5 years, since 2015, there were 26,000 estimated polar bears in the Arctic. The number has now jumped at the end of 2020 to 30,000 polar bears. This is the reason you don't hear about polar bears anymore. So that's one of the key things. On every other metric, on extreme weather, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, there is either no trend or declining trend on climate time scales. They're at the point now where they're trying to regulate, vis-a-vis the coming Green New Deal, what humans exhale from our mouth. We inhale oxygen, we exhale CO2. We've had ice ages with CO2 levels 10 times higher than today. In the film, we feature people like Robert Giegengach, the University of Pennsylvania, former head of the geology chair, 200 peer-reviewed studies, who talks about how we're at one of the lowest, geologically speaking, levels of CO2 in Earth's history, and we're one of the coldest periods of temperature in Earth's history. In other words, 90% of Earth's history was too warm to support ice at either pole. So it is amazing to see how hundreds of factors influence the climate, but politicians and the United Nations have selected one politically favored one, and they're going to try to tweak it at the margins to have some sort of impact. So the big news that's happened in the last year, and this is what's so shocking, is the COVID climate connection. And what's happened is the climate activist movement is one word for it. They're jealous. They watched 50 years of environmental activism, just, of frustration in many ways on their activism, literally be achieved through a virus scare in probably 6 weeks of a virus scare, from say the end of February 2020 until middle of April, or maybe end of March. They had, the COVID lockdowns had achieved the entire climate agenda in just a few weeks, and they were willing to admit it. Activist after activist, from John Kerry to Jane Fonda to Al Gore to Greta Thunberg, were all saying, we can do this for a virus. Why can't we keep doing this for climate? This is wonderful. The UN climate chief was saying how the lockdowns have benefited the earth. John Kerry said the parallels are screaming at us. Everything that the climate activists were seeking literally disappeared. They wanted a significant reduction of airline travels. There was actually articles right before the lockdowns about flight shaming, how people would how dare they take an airplane for vacation. Now, airline industry wiped out, tourism wiped out, international travel wiped out. They hated economic growth. Greta Thunberg just gave a speech before the COVID outbreak at the UN, railing about endless economic growth, telling the UN that how dare they for stealing her future. Well, guess what? COVID lockdowns have literally wiped out decades of economic progress. Even the World Bank and World Health Organization recognize the effects on poverty in the developing world and the destruction of lives. And you could never have achieved this, but every UN conference we went to, they openly talked about economic degrowth in order to fight climate change. Planned recessions. What is a lockdown but essentially a planned government recession based on the number of cases of COVID? And that's why they are so excited right now, because Chuck Schumer, this is about 3 weeks ago now, urging President Joe Biden to declare a national climate emergency that would give him, you ready for it? Drum roll. Emergency powers to deal with the climate emergency. Where have we heard this before? Every blue state governor from Cuomo, Michigan, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maine, California, once they get these kind of emergency powers, they're not going to give it up. There is a very real push going on right now to go from the COVID lockdowns to the climate lockdowns. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can actually see the actual quotes of the climate actors. I have 2 special reports on this at climatedepot.com, and we actually opened Climate Hustle 2 with quote after quote from the climate activists talking about how we can morph this. The UK House of Lords speaker actually said he was amazed at how, quote, compliant the public was to the COVID lockdowns. A compliant public is the greatest threat to liberty, and they want to morph that on over to the climate agenda. And so what's happening right now with COVID climate, the parallels between the two, as John Kerry said, are screaming at us. One of the things that's fascinating is the so-called consensus now. There was a thing called the Barrington Declaration against lockdowns in the COVID world. Immediately, the signers of that were deplatformed, banned. A Nobel Prize-winning chemist, I think Michael Levitt, I believe was his name, was uninvited to conferences, not because of a scientific view that he held, but because he didn't support the government lockdowns, of which there was never a precedent or recommendation prior by any public health authorities or in any public health plan. So what's happened is scientist after scientist is being muzzled, silenced, and then I'm even seeing it on Twitter. They're like, well, there's not many dissenters left. Well, that's because they're not allowed to speak out, you're not allowed to see them. If you go back to the climate world, we had polar bear experts who were uninvited from conferences, scientists who were lost tenure at professorships in Australia and the United States and Canada, scientists who have had their papers pulled, funding stopped. We interviewed them. One was Bill Gray, a hurricane expert who, during the Clinton-Gore administration, said he didn't support Al Gore's climate agenda. All of his funding literally dried up overnight. And this is what we're dealing with. In order to get the claimed 97% consensus on climate, they silence, shut up, and intimidate, bully, defund, deplatform. And we're seeing in real time the exact same thing happening with COVID dissenting scientists. It is an amazing thing to happen. And so in my time left, I want to talk about what's next. Now, this book, by the way, The Green Fraud, goes through the every aspect of the Green New Deal. My favorite chapter in this book is about the 1970s global cooling coming ice age scare. And this is legit here. Here's what happened. They were warning that our fossil fuel use was creating aerosols and causing global dimming, which was going to block the sun and create a cooling temperature. They were so worried they were proposing putting soot on Arctic ice, other kind of wacky solutions. But what was interesting, I go through every claim in the 1970s, and almost to a letter, the solution was today's Green New Deal. It was about sovereignty limiting treaties, it was about wealth redistribution, it was about central planning, it was about an attack on capitalism. And I go through, it's an amazing thing. There's all these books and articles and claims and papers. It's literally the same exact thing. And by the way, there's a whole chapter on the origin of the Green New Deal. It is awfully, eerily similar to the United Nations Agenda 21, which came out under a Republican President, George H.W. Bush, when he went down to the Rio Earth Summit And we were assured, oh, don't worry. He went down there, during the campaign, right when he was running for re-election, that nothing would be binding coming out of that. One of the greatest boondoggles we've got ourselves into, because that Rio Earth Treaty then created the UN climate treaty process, which we're now, been embroiled in. So in my final couple minutes, I want to just mention the Great Reset, because all of this is laying the stage for that. There's a reason politicians, first of all, love emergency powers. By the way, if you know who not Naomi Klein, but Naomi Wolf is, Naomi Klein is a socialist climate activist who actually, she's from Canada, she actually says capitalism and climate can't coexist. So that's her. But Naomi Wolf is a former Clinton aide, a feminist, progressive left-wing. She actually is working on a book about authoritarianism. And once you give politicians emergency powers, history has suggested they don't give it up. And you have a very narrow window in which to fight that. So what they're trying to do now with this Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, head of the World Economic Forum, announced in June publicly that we need a great reset of capitalism, and they're going to make it so that it's a reset that we're going to rebuild sustainably in a climate-friendly way. Joe Biden doesn't use the phrase Great Reset. He uses the phrase Build Back Better. They are intentionally at this point, and this is why it's still going on, even to this day, New York, Michigan, Maine, California, it's insane why they haven't opened up. It's insane why we're sitting here wearing masks. There are some people that have the mask mandate here in a allegedly free state, but not a free county, free city, free corporate agenda, but won't mention any corporate names. But anyway, what they're doing is they're trying to crush the economy, keep it crushed, keep the foot on our throats, and then they're only going to allow us a little bit of freedom, build back better. The COVID passport is a very real thing, but ultimately, we have a climate activist now openly calling named Eric Holtheis, who's all excited about Biden. He's a prominent climate activist. We can only fly when it's, quote, morally acceptable during a climate emergency. That is what they want. Now remember, you have to stay at home unless it's essential. You're at curfew unless it's a reason you have to give the government. This is the greatest battle that we've faced, in terms of our freedom as a nation. I mean, this, obviously slavery, Japanese internment affected them really, but in terms of it as a whole nation, this is a generalized transfer of power to the government. The lockdowns are the greatest threat, and now they want to morph it over to the climate agenda in the face of the Green New Deal, in the face of what we call the Great Reset. And by the way, the Great Reset is their word. John Kerry openly says the Great Reset will happen faster than anyone thinks. Al Gore has praised the Great Reset. This is what they're trying to do, crush us down and then rebuild us back up in the image that they've been trying to do, the progressive left, for 50 years. So we are facing the greatest threat to freedom. It begins with the COVID lockdowns and it morphs to the climate lockdowns. I'm sorry, I'm going to say this. I think it's a greater threat than anything BLM can throw at us. I think it's a greater threat than anything foreign can throw at us. And one last word on national security war. We have John Kerry out there just peddling nonsense about climate being a national security threat. The only, first of all, studies have shown that it's cold times that cause more war. Cold times cause crop failures. Cold times cause more conflict. This is the Center for Strategic International Studies have found that. So what John Kerry is claiming is the exact opposite of truth. What causes wars are when you have someone awesome like President Trump, who has the greatest energy dominance policy we could ever have. We became the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. By 2019, under President Trump, we had, since the first time since Harry S. Truman was president in 1952, more energy exports than imports. We also had more energy exports than consumption, exports than consumption. It was true not independence, but energy dominance. We are tossing all that away at this point under Biden as he starts banning and upsetting each constituency. You have Democrat Party labor unions now attacking Biden. But what they've done, the only real threat we face now, we're going to be relying on Chinese rare earth mining for electric cars, solar panels, wind panels. They want to get 3.8% of our energy in the United States and somehow make us net zero, carbon free in 10, 15, 20 years, depending on which plan. It's a fantasy land. 1915, 80+% of our energy came from fossil fuels. 2019, 80+% of our energy came from fossil fuels. But somehow, the Green New Deal is going to magically transform that 3.8% coming from solar and wind, and we're going to have no more fossil fuels, a fossil-free world, as Joe Biden said. You can bet your bet your whatever, he said, I'm going to get rid of fossil fuels. This is our battle. This is what we're facing. It is a great threat, and you need to educate them. Start with the film Climate Hustle 2, and start with the Heartland Institute. They've done great alternative UN reports on this, by the way. And now I'll turn over the mic to Kevin Sorbo here. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
How dare you?
God's not dead.
No, he's not. That's true. You know why Gore didn't put the polar bears in there? Because it's white privilege. There you go. You can only talk about brown bears and black bears now. So here's my experience with Al Gore. I was at the Sundance Films Festival when he was there with his Inconvenient Truth, and I was at some big hoity party and stuff, and I was talking with a couple of friends of mine, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, Vice President Al Gore is a big fan. He'd like to meet you." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Sure." So I walked over to meet him and shook his hand, and he did his picture. So I wanted a picture too, so I did a little selfie with him and stuff. And I said, it was just right after you got to bring up the hanging Chad since we're here in Florida, right? So I looked at him and I said, it's my vote that made you lose the presidency. And he laughed like you guys just did now. Then I looked at him stone cold and I said, "Not really, sir, it was my vote." And I walked away, and I know he was looking. He's got to be a liberal. He's like a Hollywood actor. So that was my introduction to him at that event. So I guess my tie into doing this was because of this guy right here and this guy right here, and they approached me and they said, "Well, he's already got himself kicked out of Hollywood by being a conservative and being a Christian," because that's what did happen to me, by the way. It was about at least 10, 11 years ago I started being more vocal about, I would be on movie sets and TV sets and people would say stuff and it would just be these blanket statements. And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And so they would kind of look at me and go, "What's he talking about? Why is he not agreeing with us?" So I said, "Let's have a conversation about this. Let's bring us some facts and truth instead of just labels." Because as you know, the left loves their labels. You're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're anti-Semite, you're whatever. You're a Nazi. They love doing that one. They just love that one. They can never prove that, of course. They love their label and just walk away. If I start going after them with any kind of facts or truth, they say, "You're wrong," and they walk away. That's how they handle their arguments. "Yeah, you're wrong," and that's it. Follow the science or whatever like that. So my wife warned me about it, and sure enough, my agent called me in, my manager called me and said, "We have to move on. We can't keep you in the doors anymore, because just being conservative is enough to get me out there. I'm supposed to be in an industry that screams for tolerance and freedom of speech, but it's a one-way street with these guys, as you know." So I got very vocal about global warming too. I said, "Really? This is what's going on in the world right now? I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that." I started reading articles and all that, and so I became more vocal about that. And that's when they got a hold of me and said, "Since Hollywood's already kicked you out, we might as well endear you more to the green elites of Hollywood and have a chat about this." So when they brought me in, I'm more like the moderator in this. I found this was very educational for me. I got to tell you, get 10 copies and pass them on to your friends. Pass them on to your liberal friends if you have any. I still do, and we still get along. To me, it's like I don't harbor the hate and the anger and the divisiveness that comes from the left. This is the party's the Democrat Party that says we need peace and love. And how do they do that? How does BLM and Antifa and everybody else do that? By going through our cities and destroying people's businesses, lives, attacking people with tire irons and guns and baseball bats, and saying at the same time, we want to change the world. Antifa, are you kidding me? They're the fascists. They say they're against fascism. It's called projection, folks. It's called everything the left blames the right for, they're already guilty of. The biggest killer right now in our country from the right is apathy. We have to have the same passion that they have on the left, but don't do it in the anger and hatred that they do it in. Don't do it that way. We can't be afraid. I've got so many friends in Hollywood that are conservative, and they won't come out of that closet. It closed the door on me, but it opened another door, and I started doing movies that are more family-friendly, movies that have Christian values, moral values, values of how this country was founded. I tell people all the time, our Constitution, our laws were based on the Bible. We were founded on Judeo-Christian values. And we're getting away from that. And we can't be afraid to stand up for it. So when I got involved in this project, these guys put together an amazing script for me as well. I'm not ad-libbing, I had ad-libbing some places in it, but it really was very educational for me, and I didn't disagree with the stuff they were giving me. But really, I'm the moderator. I introduce different people that are coming in. We show the hypocrisy of the left, because we know the hypocrisy is there. We see it all the bloody time. As you see a guy like DiCaprio saying one thing, then you see him flying away in his airplane, just like John Kerry in their private, in their G5. So when people, you bring on people that sit there and want to, get rid of capitalism. Capitalism was built America. It was individuals that built America, not big government. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Number one, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Term limits, guys. We really got to fight for term limits. How do we do that? How do we get rid of 40-year careers for these bozos?
That's true.
And how do we, and this one thing that I wasn't happy with Trump when he signed that relief bill, when we found out that the majority of the billions were going to other countries. Why? Why are we sending billions of dollars to countries, of our taxpayer dollars, to countries that don't like us to begin with? We're trying to buy friendship? This is crazy. This is stupid to me. Let's spend billions on gender studies. I'll tell you gender studies. Look what below your waistline is, okay? You're either a male or a female. Can we just leave it at that and move on? I mean, what is wrong with our country right now? It's insane. Come on, man. I'm with you on that one. Why aren't they doing that in ESPN football? I mean, come on. But the reality is we've got to fight together. We've got to get there and start doing this kind of thing, because I've just gotten to a point now that it's just crazy. Behind closed doors, I get plenty of guys come up to me and say, I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing, but I got a family to feed. Well, so do I. So I opened another door and I started doing independent movies. And it's not easy to raise money for the movies I'm doing. I mean, I do $3 to $4 million budgets. Well, that's a lot of money. No, it's not.
No, it's
that's
not.
a catering budget on Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's not a lot of
These are
money.
$300 million movies,
Nothing.
guys. Andrew Breitbart, God bless him. I knew him very well. Rest in peace. He said politics is downstream of culture. Who runs the culture? Hollywood does. Hollywood does. And what do they do? What are the movies they're putting out? Look what Netflix is putting out. Look what Amazon's putting out. When I did a movie called Let There Be Light. If you haven't seen it, please see it. It is on Amazon right now. That little movie was a $2.3 million movie that Sean Hannity funded, okay? Wow. I'm sitting in my office, phone rings, hello, Sorbo Hannity, how you doing? I said, good. He says, I love that God's Not Dead movie and What If. You got something like that? And I said, I do. Fly to New York and pitch it to me. Can I just pitch it to you? No, get on the plane. Hangs up. We go to New York, we go to his radio office, we sit up there, we pitched him for 30 minutes. You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. In 30 minutes, Hannity did not interrupt us once. He turned around, grabbed the checkbook out of his book, wrote a check right there, handed it to me, said, I know nothing about your business. It's your business. I love what you do. I trust what you guys do. I don't want to see dailies, whatever you call it. I don't want to see reports. When the movie's done, when it's music, everything, then show it to me. I looked at him and said, Mr. Hannity, you're my most favorite executive producer I've ever met.
Yeah.
Love this one. That movie opened up #2 against a $300 million Thor Ragnarok movie. I get a call from Netflix, okay? We opened up #2 per screen average. Netflix calls me up and says, we see you have a door into this world. So we would like to open an inspirational division here at Netflix. Wait now.
Okay.
I had 3 meetings with them over about a 2-month period in the Hollywood offices, okay? Sent them a number of wonderful scripts that I have that are not sort of faith-based, they're inspirational, they're family-driven, they're true stories, they're really good stories about redemption and hope and love and laughter, things that they're not doing right now at Hollywood, okay? Right. So what happens? Nothing. I still have an open door with these people. It's 2 years later now, and they still have not done nothing with it. I could call them right now, they would call me back. So the door is still open. Because the last meeting I sat with them, I said, you guys, your ideology, dealing with this as well, dealing with anything else, is so against even people that are conservative, people that have Christian values. There's 80 million homes out there, 80 million homes that want movies that are family friendly. They want movies like movies that I do. And because of your ideology and the divide that you created between people that are conservative, you won't do it. It's called show business. It's not show. You are not an industry that you can sit there, they can sit there, Paramount, Universal, they can go, oh yeah, socialism, this is good. BS. Behind closed doors, they want to make money. They're a capitalist business. Of course. You know they're a capitalist business. They want their stockholders happy. But they know that the under 30 crowd that's been indoctrinated by our public education system in our universities and indoctrinated with global warming as well, which by the way, I call weather. Is they get so brainwashed, and they get so bent up with the anger you talk. They get these people coming out. We got to get rid of this, get rid of that, and get rid of everybody's life, and you go back to. I mean, I get people coming after me saying that, how can you believe this kind of stuff and what's going on? And I said, I'll tell you what, then. Instead of you coming after me being angry on the internet, why don't you get a quill and ink and write me a paper, and by horseback have it sent to me, and then I'll explain to you how you're wrong about the growth of the world and growth of technology. You can't stop technology. We're going to keep on growing. Life changes. That's the way it is. And it's crazy that people are doing this to us right now, and I'm trying to fight the good fight and keep fighting the good fight, and we need you to fight it. As I said, apathy is the biggest killer right now that's going on, especially on the right side. We got to fight with the same degree of passion they do, but like I said, without the anger, without the hatred that they have, because I got to put up with it all the time. I can say 2 + 2 = 4 on the internet, and people go, I hope you die. I hope you die. See, this whole COVID thing too, I just got cancel culture. I got taken out from Facebook. They took 550,000 followers away from me 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
They just cut down my site. And what do? I post the truth. I post the truth about this. I post the truth about COVID. I say, look, I know it's dangerous. I know it's bad. So is the flu. So is other things. But in the history of life, human life, we've always had to deal with different viruses that come and go. But look what they're doing to us.
Yeah.
Fear is an amazing weapon, people.
That's
It's
right.
an unbelievable weapon. They're using it to control our lives and destroy businesses around the world.
That's
A
right.
third generation mom and pop grocery store has to shut down because it's not essential, but Walmart and Costco can stay open.
And the liquor stores.
And the stripper poles, because you really need the stripper pole.
We need them.
It's very important. Oh, it's unbelievable. But let's not talk about the rise in suicide rates, the rise in
That's right.
spousal
The
abuse,
mental health.
and child abuse, and the drug dependency, and
State of
alcoholism.
education.
It just keeps going. State of education has always been going down. I grew up in that world. My dad was a public school teacher, okay? 35 years he taught 7th and 8th graders. I don't know I did 35 years of puberty, but he managed to get through it anyway. But I'll tell you right now, I look at now what's going on in public schools, and I'm sure most of us in this room never had that in high school, grade school, college. I never had teachers tell me how I should vote. Never had teachers tell me I shouldn't believe in God. They taught what they were supposed to teach. I never had that. Even in college, I never had that. There was also student groups doing certain things, protesting, whatever, but never had teachers tell me that you got to believe this way. So it's amazing what we have to go through right now. It's incredible. So we have to keep fighting, guys. We can't give up on this thing. And I'm very proud to be part of this. And the backlash is there. Here's the frustrating thing. How many documentaries can get to 800 screens? We have 800 movie theaters ready to take this. And COVID killed it, which is just a drag because it would have gone higher than that, trust me. But to get a documentary in the movie theaters to be able to do that is astounding. And their first Climate Hustle did phenomenal because of it. So I've been talking the last 2 days, I'm losing my voice. But it's been a pleasure to be here. I've been to a couple of CPACs before, but this one to me is the most satisfying because there's so much crap going on right now in the world. And I sit there, I fly a lot still, and I got my mask below my nose and the flight attendants, oh my God, get it above your nose, get it above your nose. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm on a plane. And literally 6 feet or closer, there are 24 passengers. You got 3, 6, 9, 12, the same behind me and people next to me. But when you get off of the plane, make sure it's one row at a time. And then stay 6 feet apart as you exit. They limited us to these seats. They're spread apart. Meanwhile, downstairs, you got 2,000 seats shoulder to shoulder. What is the difference? What is the bloody difference? I know. I gotta walk in the restaurant with a mask, and then I sit down, I can take it off, but COVID's only at 6 feet, it's not down here. I hate the fact that they're using this as a weapon to destroy our lives, and we gotta fight, but yeah, you can't go to church either. My church, I'm living here now in Florida, been here for over 2 years. Left the craziness of California, but my pastor is still Pastor Rob McCoy, does a lot of work with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. And so his church has been going. I was back this summer. Believe it or not, I shot 8 episodes of a half-hour comedy. Hope it gets out. It's called The Pot Wins. When it comes out, please support it. It's like Last Man Standing, Tim Allen's show. Barry Bostwick plays my crazy hippie pot-smoking dad. If you don't know Barry Bostwick, he was the mayor in Spin City with Michael J. Fox. And I got the radical left crazy daughter, and I got the 15-year-old son who's more right than I am. So it's a good mixture of stuff, and it's just very funny how they wrote this and put it together. So we hope that comes out soon. While I was there, 3 COVID tests a week, everybody on both sides. We didn't get a false positive. We made it through the 8 weeks. But I was going to my church out in Thousand Oaks, and there were like 2,000 people outside because he was getting fined every day. I was meeting atheists coming up to the parking lot. They couldn't get in because the church was filled, and they're saying, I'm an atheist, but I love the fact that your pastor's standing up to California and Governor Gruesome.
Wow, come on. Come on, wow. Come on. Get him in the house sometime.
Facebook did take me down, so I hope you guys will follow me. I'm still on Twitter. I do a lot of humor stuff on Twitter. I know when Newsom said you have to be in your house by 10 o'clock across the state, it's a lockdown, so I posted one thing. I said, phew, it's 9:58. I just made it back home. I beat COVID. I got like 500,000 hits or something, but a lot of stuff like that. I'm losing my...
Join Parler. It's back up.
losing my voice. I'm in Parler as well. You ever talk?
Let the man rest.
Cloud Hub is great too. You take over, I'll take Q&A. My voice will come back in a second, but I've been talking so much.
Let the man rest.
This time we're going to take some Q&A. I always wondered, Kevin, you're originally from Minnesota.
I am.
Did
Yeah.
that inspire you to want to take our film on climate change and global warming? I encourage you to do that. Anyway, we are going to take questions next. We do ask that you make it a question and not a sermon or address. And Lori, can you take the microphone?
I'm gonna throw one. Oh, I love you.
He does need to make
Can I
it
ask
right.
folks, because time is short, make sure the questions are in a question and quite short. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Ben. I was already on board with all this. I understand it. My question is, what's the solution? I know don't be apathetic, but I mean, I almost got kicked out of here yesterday for not wearing a mask. Well, I'm willing to fight tooth and nail, but
You gotta pass that microphone.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is,
Flip it up.
that's good. I always like to say that Berlin Wall didn't come down because the East German parliament voted to remove it. It came down because the people no longer gave it consent. I think it has to be mass defiance, not one person getting, I mean, it starts with one person, but I really do think at some point, especially in free states where people, can go to one county and not have mandates and then go to closer to a city and blue Democrats. It's got to be just that. You got to stop complying with these mandates and just put the fear of God in politicians at election time and start testifying, get kids back. I mean, I know school's kind of a weird thing. You really want them back in public schools, but yeah, I guess still probably better at some point to get back to school.
Just very quickly so we can get to the next question, but at the Heartland Institute, we are working with state legislatures around the country to rein in out-of-control governors. It's our project called Governors Not Gods, because the emergency powers they've claimed are not justified by law, and so we're getting the state legislatures to step in and reclaim the powers that are rightfully theirs.
All right, my name is Stephen Gafanti. I have a simple question. Here's my $10, but I don't see where the videos are being sold.
Bob, can you get
Yes.
the videos?
Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank
My name is Ron Birdie, and my understanding is the Green New Deal is, its goal is to get 1/10 of a degree remediation in 80 years. And I can't understand why we don't make more of an argument about that. In other words, if they're right, the Green New Deal isn't enough to solve anything.
Yes. Well, I mean, not only the Green New Deal, but every UN climate summit has been declared a planet-saving thing. The UN Paris Agreement, 2015, Obama, Al Gore, the UN chief, the John Kerry, etc., the French president, UK, but all of them praise that we've done this for our children, our grandchildren, and then a few years later, this has failed, this was hopeless, this could have no impact, this is, we needed something 100 times bigger. So every time that they try to sell it, it's something that's saving the earth, and then in reality is it does nothing. If we actually faced a climate emergency, we would be doomed if we had to rely on the UN Paris Agreement or the Green New Deal, and that's just the reality. There's nothing they're proposing that have any impact.
Let me see if I can talk a little bit good. There's studies I've been seeing lately. I saw a graph just last week, and I got one up here as well that somebody gave me earlier. The last 100 years, the average temperature around the world, depending on what graph you want to look at, the temperature has risen 0.41 degrees or maybe 1.56 degrees. That's it. It's somewhere between less than 1 and maybe than 1.5 degrees over the last 100 years, guys. For those of you remember the 70s, I was in high school and grade school and all that during that decade. That was the coldest decade on record. And the cover of Life magazine, I believe in January in '77, said, "Are we entering another ice age?" They keep changing. That's why they switched from global warming to climate change. That's why they switched it. Everything's got to be feared. I was flipping channels one day and there was a weather channel and said tornadoes. I grew up in Minnesota. I've never seen tornadoes. I'm fascinated by them, so I stopped to watch it. So they showed this tornado that went through Missouri, okay? And they said it was an F4. And after that, they said, but if it was an F5, this is what would have happened. Well, it wasn't an F5. But they want, everything is about fear and control over our lives. It's so many millions of people buy into it. I see people at the grocery store. I live down in West Palm Beach. I see people not just with 2 masks on, but that plastic thing in front of them as well. And like surgical gloves on, and I'm going, oh my God. And I walk into Publix, I don't wear a mask until they ask me.
Exactly.
I walk in without it. 80% of the time, you know, I see, I'm a biker, okay? I can't run anymore. I ran too long, I beat up my knees, but I still bike a lot. So I'm out there biking, I see people running by themselves, biking, and they got a bloody mask on. I said, you're outside. I got 2 doctor friends at the Mayo Clinic, they gotta keep their mouth shut, otherwise they'll get in trouble. And they say you want real social distancing, honestly, you gotta be about 20 feet apart. You know? We've had a vaccine for the flu for 79 years, and still 40 to 50,000 people a year die every year in America. Nobody's died from the flu this year, amazingly. It's disappeared. Guys, it's insanity.
And pneumonia too, and it doesn't exist anymore.
Public education, guys. And here's the thing. I grew up, my dad was a school teacher, as I said earlier. Here's the thing. Teachers, go back to work. They're afraid to be in front of 25, 30 kids in their classroom. Meanwhile, Costco workers and everybody else, there's 1,000 people a day going through there. This is insanity. If we stop paying teachers, then they'll go back to work. I don't like the public schools either because the indoctrination is in, but we gotta fight back somehow. But to keep kids out of school, I don't think it's good either. When I see kids, I walk through airports and I'm very vocal. I see a 7-year-old with their mom and dad with a mask on. I go, oh, child abuse, nice.
I'm Virginian, and I'm here from Florida. And the thing that I got into on climate change is I started looking at if it goes too low, what happens to us? Carbon dioxide goes too low. And I actually realized that if it goes too low, it's an extinction event. Yeah. Can we talk about that in this movie or any of the other stuff? Because that's the thing that worries me. Even if they achieved their goal, what they would do is kill us all.
That is a fantastic question and observation that most people do not know. In fact, if carbon dioxide levels had continued dropping as they had, we were perilously close to losing all life on Earth. We are still very close to that number. And when you look back over time, historically, if you go back over the ages on Earth, the typical, and it fluctuates so much, so even typical is kind of making a generalization, but the typical levels would be about 1,000 parts per million, not the current 320 or whatever it is right now. It would be about 3 times what is the case right now. Actually, it's gone up to what, 400, I believe it is now. So we'd have to keep increasing carbon dioxide levels just to get where we are normally. And by the way, there has been no correlation between those carbon dioxide levels and temperatures over the history of the Earth.
In fact, a study after study from NASA is greening of the Earth, shrinking of deserts, more trees, vegetation because of rising CO2 and bios.
Yes, Dennis Black. I'm from Virginia Beach, and I have had the pleasure of being at a number of the climate conferences that you put on. Just this week, I had Dr. Jay Lair on with the congressman, and the question for you is, okay, that Dr. Jay Lair has pointed out, and there's a one-pager out there that shows that the largest greenhouse gas by 95% is, what is it? Water vapor. Now, why is it that the next 100 people that I come across don't know that? They all need to know that today, okay? Because that is the one thing that defrauds all of this, because carbon dioxide is 0.12%. water vapor, 95% is science.
That
Why
is
isn't-
fantastic. Thank you for the observation. And just to put that in context, and by the way, Dr. Jay Lair, long time with the Heartland Institute, now with CFACT, so representing both our organizations. If we had a hockey arena that seats 10,000 people, and if the people in the stands each represented one element in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide would be 4 people in that arena. Represent that. That's the proportion of the atmosphere. And by the way, this scary, great experiment, this out of control existential crisis, that's because it used to be 3 people. Now it's 4.
Thanks to the left and the EPA, carbon dioxide is now classified as carbon pollution. How do we re-educate people to understand that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant like smokestack pollution?
That's the challenge of the day. We actually have scientists in the film go through and explain how it's not a pollutant. They use the word pollutant for CO2 is bastardizing the English language. We actually had Will Happer testify in the US Senate, I think it was 2009, about how it's literally, it's Orwellian speak to actually try to do that. Carbon dioxide is, we exhale from our mouth. It's good for photosynthesis, it's good for plants, trees, and they've demonized it to, as Al Gore says, carbon pollution. And it's not any definition of pollution at all.
I got a great note here on the carbon cycle. The Earth releases naturally 800 billion tons of CO2 every year. Man produces about 20 times less than that, around 50 million tons. The Earth reabsorbs all of its own CO2 plus 60% of man's. So that means 40%, there's more out there now. What does that do? Well, let's say greenhouses artificially increase CO2. It grows more plants is what it does. Bigger, faster, and with less water. CO2 is God's gift to us and God's gift to the planets and the Earth. So it's insane what we're doing once again to try to fear factor people into believing that we're destroying the world. And we're fighting trillions of dollars to worry about 100 years of 1 degree higher? Really? Trillions of dollars?
We need people dressed as trees with signs that say, "Stop stealing my carbon."
Before you dismiss, I'm going to tell you one funny story about that. I was at the Kyoto Agreement, which predated the Paris Agreement, and they brought a bunch of activists in, and they had trees and bushes as you went into the Kyoto summit, and they had little bubbles coming out of them as though the trees were talking. One of them said, "No more global warming." One said, "Don't stop the temperature rise." The other one said, a plant, said, "No more CO2." I took a picture of that. I thought that was good, but that's what we're battling against. So we thank you for coming to our side event. We are pleased to have you here.